We're on now.
Awesome. Let's start again.
Yeah. So yeah, welcome everyone to our Power BI for Enviros, our 5th session, all about today's data visualization and sort of design in your dashboards. And we're very lucky to have Michael Berry presenting on the visualization process. In particular is Global Warming and Radiative Forcing Makeover Monday dashboard. And we've also got Ben Ferry, also known as the Power BI guy, joining us all the way from Berlin, Germany, to help with a bit of an open Q&A. So as part of the second half, we encourage you to come off mute and just share a little bit of your sort of experiences and also ask your questions as well. So just some general housekeeping. Obviously, we're using Teams for this session today. So please mute when you're not speaking. Type your questions in the chat as you go through and we'll endeavour to answer them or make time for letting the speakers answer them. Session is being recorded. Thanks, Alice. Good. And we'll have it up on the YouTube channel and our blog afterwards. And a Teams tip, if you want to zoom in when someone is sharing, you can hold control and scroll your mouse forward. And just some tips at the bottom. So I'd just like to firstly acknowledge the Boonwurrung and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, which is the traditional custodians of the lands from which we're presenting here today, actually down in the Mornington Peninsula, and pay our respect to their elders past and present, and also acknowledge the traditional owners from where you're dialing in from and listening to as well. So both Alice and I work for Discovery Eye and we're sponsoring the event through the Meetup. In case you don't know, we sort of offer a Power BI training, mentoring, custom visual development through our industry partner, Daniel Marsh-Patrick, who's fantastic in this space. Do a lot of end-to-end Power BI reporting and solutions, also the graphic design, so I'm particularly passionate about sort of the design elements and the data storytelling, and also custom web apps as well. And we've got an exciting prize again. Reza and Layla from in New Zealand from Radicad have kindly offered a 1 free month subscription to their Radicad Academy online course, which is a fantastic online learning resource with a chunk of different videos that you can get into, not just on Power BI, but across all the different areas of the business in terms of creating these data solutions that we all work with, including the Intro to Custom Visuals video produced by Daniel Marsh-Patrick. So I would encourage you to have a look at the Radicad course online, and they've got a lot of great content. But today's question, so how many have we got?
So we've got about 23 people on the call now, so okay. Good chances. Okay, so today's question being data visualization, Power BI, question for a 3 month subscription is pretty easy. What is your #1 data viz tip? So first person to show their video and come off mute and just tell us their tip wins the prize. Speakers are excluded, sorry guys. Awesome. So over to you, audience, please feel free. Who wants a prize? We've got a very shy group here today. The tip it can just be your favorite tip.
You got someone typing in chat.
Oh, do we? Hold on. Let me
open the chat up.
Chat open.
Thanks, Michael.
Oh, Douglas. Do you want to go off mute and say hi? Using app to collate your report.
Hi, just the tip I think is to, when you have a lot of reports, the dashboards, would it be easier to collate all those reports in an app so the end users can find it in an easy way?
Awesome. Absolutely. I love that tip. That is so good because if you're just having a look at the Power BI reports just in the workspaces, it's not that intuitive, especially
not
user
to navigate and not to ease.
Yeah, especially for big organizations, it really just helps to sort of set up the structure of where all these things are located and make access to it quite easily. So look, Douglas, we give it to you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
3 month subscription to Radicad, and they're in your neck of the woods, hey? Like very close to where you're based in New Zealand.
So thanks that, Douglas. We'll let Reza know and he'll be in touch. So that's good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Awesome, well done.
And also just another thing, in April, there's a big virtual conference being organised again by Reza and his team. It's the Global Power BI Summit. So we'd encourage you to have a look at it. It's got an amazing range of speakers, some of the absolute experts, I think, including, you know, Marco and Alberto, Phil Seamark.
The Power BI, a lot from the Power BI team, but also Guy and a Cube, the Discovery AI team. We're both very honoured to be presenting as well.
So, yeah, we'll share all these links if you want to go and find out a little bit more. But, yeah, no, they're doing some great work over there. And now on to today's agenda. So, as I touched on, we have Michael Berry from Melbourne. You from Melbourne or Victoria, more general, Michael?
Yeah, Melbourne.
Melbourne.
So from Melbourne, talking about his Makeover Monday dashboard in terms of what's warming the globe. And then we'll have an open Q&A where we've got Ben Ferry, our special guest. If you haven't seen some of the stuff that he does, follow at Power BI Guy on Twitter. And he's also just recently started up a YouTube channel unpacking different publicly available dashboards in terms of their design features. And yeah, he's doing some really great stuff. So Ben, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks so much.
But without further ado, I guess, Michael, we'll more than happy, mate, if you want to take it away, we'll stop sharing and
no worries.
Looking forward to your session, mate. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, all looks good. Perfect.
Okay, great. So today I'm covering in this short session just my thought process and the choices I've made when putting together my visualizations for the Makeover Monday for what's warming the globe. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a data and visualization specialist with Accenture currently. I've had many years of experience in visualization, data analysis and BI in general, with my primary focus over the last 4 years being Power BI. There's a couple of details there where you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter at DataBerry.au. So firstly, kind of what is data visualization? So as Klaus Wilk said in his Fundamentals of Data Visualization is part art and part science, and the challenge is to get the art right without getting the science wrong, and vice versa. So for anyone who hasn't read that that document, it's available for free online, or you can buy it as a book as well. It's a really great thing about the fundamentals of data visualization. Now, Makeover Monday, for those that haven't heard about it, it's a data challenge that's been going on since, I think, 2017, started by the Tableau community. And I want to encourage more and more people who use Power BI to get involved so that we can get out there and challenge the Tableau guys at visualization. You can get to it here at makeovermonday.co.uk, and you can just navigate to the data sets in here, participate, and then you can see 2016, there you go. And you can go in, you can explore each of the data sets and do your own visualizations. And then you can also check on Twitter at the hashtag MakeoverMonday. We are starting to get some on LinkedIn as well, but it's primarily done via Twitter. And you can just see these feeds of all these people from all over the globe sharing their visualizations for the various data sets. So it's a great way to get started with visualization. And so this particular one was week 3 of 2021, and it's based on this Bloomberg dataset from 2015 called What's Really Warming the World. So I just want to take some time to show you this because it's an exceptionally good visualization. So as you can see here, you've got this nice little ticker which is going along, and it shows you, some notes as to various parts and includes the text here. And then as you scroll down, it's showing you the different factors that go into, well, could potentially be affecting the warming of the world. And I also really like the confidence interval that they're doing across it as well. So as we keep going, so as you can see, these things really are having a negligent impact over the global temperature rise. Now let's keep skipping. And as you go, some of these actually have negative influences on temperature, but the temperature is still going up. And then when you plot it against the greenhouse gases, you can see that it correlates very well. And then see for yourself. And then it combines all the factors, and look at that fit. That's amazing how nicely it's done. So, I mean, when I saw this, I instantly thought, oh wow, how can you improve on that visualization? I can't think of an example of data storytelling for climate change which paints a more effective visual. They also have very strong methodology. They're using NASA's data for the temperature. And then they have all these other citations. So the authors did an exceptional job with this particular visual. So I was very intimidated when I saw it. But instantly, the particular visual that came to mind are if you guys haven't seen it, they're pretty famous. They even made it the cover of the Time magazine at one point. So they're called the Warming Stripes by Ed Hawking. Unfortunately, in terms of visualization, it's actually pretty ineffective. You don't have any sense of scale. You know, this could be going from -20 to +100 and you wouldn't know. There's no, axes, there's nothing like that. But it does paint the particular story that Ed Hawking was trying to make, who's a climatologist. But in terms of the practical visualization that we do in our daily lives, this is not the sort of thing that I would be recommending that people, yeah, exactly, abstract art, yeah. It's definitely more on that art side, yes. So something that came to mind, although it wasn't included in the data set, was I was thinking this forcing data that was the coloured band across the screen next to the temperature, it looked like it fit too well. And if something looks like it fits too well, that gets my spider senses tingling. I start thinking, is there an error there? Is there a problem there? I need to understand why that fits the story so nicely. And you need to ask yourself these questions when you're doing visualization. If something looks too good, it often can be. So what I did was I used the data sources that they had given me, that were cited in the article, and I imported them. And as you can see, they're pretty hard to understand. We've got numbers that are going from virtually no difference across, this wide range, and then they kind of go out there. In terms of trying to understand it, it's really, really difficult to understand. So I decided I needed to actually do some research into what this was. I just didn't understand. And in order to visualize something properly, you do need to understand what you're looking at. So, I mean, I'm not a climatologist, I'm not a climate scientist, I'm a data guy. So I needed to get my research hat on. So I started digging through the sources that they had provided for me, and I found these guys here. So the working group on coupled modeling, they're the people who actually designed this forcing data set, and they continue to update it. It's available. You can see all their methodology online. It was quite interesting. And after a while, I worked out that these forcings are called radiative forcing. And what radiative forcing is essentially a measure of how much solar radiation is absorbed by the Earth and not reflected, with each factor having a plus or minus effect on the amount of that energy absorbed. And you can see here on the left this little graph showing how many watts per meter squared you get from the various factors. So as you can see, aerosols and land reflectivity changes actually have a negative impact on the amount of sunlight absorbed, whereas all these greenhouse gases are increasing it. And it's quite an interesting article to have a read of if you've got the time. So I wanted to get more of a handle on the influence that each factor was making. I mean, as I showed you on that previous tab, it was quite hard to understand. So I wanted to make sure that there weren't any misleading things on the axes. So sometimes when you're putting something onto a secondary axis and you're, say, filtering your results, that secondary axis may be changing, and so it may not be keeping the same fixed distance between things. So what I wanted to do was explore that. So to keep the data in line with the temperature data and also to display it as something that made more sense, I wanted to calculate the difference. So the NASA temperature data uses a 1951 to 1980 baseline to calculate their plus or minus from that temperature. So that's what is called the temperature anomaly. And so I did the same thing with the radiative forcing. I took the mean for between these years of all of these different factors. And then I compared each factor against that mean to get a normalized value that maintains the shape of the data. So as you can see here, we're going from these more unwieldy figures down to a factor that looks, is easier to interpret for our feeble human brains. And you can see here at the bottom, I've just overlaid the two data sets. So you've got all the forcings and all the forcings as an anomaly, and you can see that the shape of the data is exactly the same because you are just comparing against that one normalizing factor. So now that I had more of a handle on the data and I had an approach that I wanted to do, I was able to start my visualizations. So the first visuals off the rank is a basic line and stack column charts with each one for the temperature and one for the forcing. And I also chose to do a 10-year rolling average as the line to get that more smooth perspective so you can see over time how things are changing instead of just seeing those kind of spikes. It gives you more of a trend to the data. Now I've chosen the red and blue, although it's not especially great for people who are colorblind impaired. It does have that natural affinity with hot and cold for the majority of people. So that's why I've gone with that. And the trend line I've tried to keep to a neutral color so that although it's visible, it's not detracting. I'm quite happy with how those two charts turned out. Sorry, was there a question? No. So the second visualization, I wanted to tell most of the story. I wanted to show how everything combines together and tells the main point of my visualization. So I actually went through a lot of iterations of the chart, with most of them just feeling too busy and cluttered. I originally wanted to include all four metrics, but it was just too much. So some examples here, you can see it's just very hard to tell what's happening here. It's way too messy. I tried some different colors and some different, I mean, I do like a good stepped line because they're quite cute, but it really doesn't tell you anything about the data, unfortunately. So I kept trying. And this is something that's important to understand about the visualization process, is often you don't come up with your finished product at the start. It is an iterative process, and you need to keep improving until you get something that's really clear. So I tried to fit the two charts together, but once again, due to all the extra parts that go into axes and lines and titles and everything, you just lose space and you lose information. It's very hard to tell these things apart and see kind of what's happening. So where I ended up with this primary visualization, so I settled on combining the rolling averages into an overall trend. Because they are both anomaly factors, it's able to get that trend between them, and it paints that picture of the ever-increasing trend. I also wanted to include that 2 degrees centigrade upper limit so that you can get a view of kind of how far we've got to go until we reach that, bearing in mind that the forcings data set only goes up to 2005, but the temperature I got up until last year. So we are still creeping up, and you can see that definite trend on the way up, and that is what we're trying to. That's the point I was trying to get across for this visualization. So the third visualization, or the two last visualizations that I wanted to do, was to finalize the report. I wanted to call back to the original Bloomberg report because I really like it. And so I put together two charts contrasting the largest contributing factor, which is the greenhouse gas, and all the other factors. And as you can see quite clearly, greenhouse gas is the one that is contributing the most overall, and it's actually carrying the negative forces from the other anomalies that are involved. So this is the final visualization that I ended up with. Part of the challenge of doing the Makeover Mondays is to try and get a final visualization that really pops and really tells the story in kind of one go, because you want to have like a nice picture to be able to post that picture essentially. So in terms of visualizations, you do want it to be quite clear and tell a compelling story. And when I'm dealing with clients, I often find that this is a more effective way to display data anyway. You know, a lot of people out there aren't analysts and aren't great at kind of exploring data themselves and playing with slices and doing things. So if you can craft the story that you want to show, or the thing that really hits with business impact, and tells the story that you want, then I would advise you to try to do away with as many of the extra parts that you don't need, and keep it to that really clear, concise story. So that's what I've got for you today. Does anyone have any questions?
Oh, that was awesome, Michael. Thank you so much. It's so nice to hear the progression of the visualization process, because I know for us, we work a lot in the front end and it is super iterative. You go through 3 or 4 different iterations before you arrive at it. But all that thinking behind it is, it's so important and it's so interesting. I loved your use of all the conditional formatting and the different kind of small text annotations that could really, really help. I think there are a couple of questions. I think Carrie had a question up in the chat. Do you know what tool they use to create the Bloomberg data viz? It was like scalable.
It would just be D3.js. So the visual library that they use for to render Power BI is D3.js, and you can actually embed that in a website, but it is more of a coding skill. You know, it's all TypeScript, and it's quite mathy.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I know you can write, all the custom visuals you can write using D3. But that is such a really neat visualization technique. I love it.
How I don't know, Michael, how long did it sort of take you to build that visualization from sort of start? This is my idea, to through the iterations to obviously delivering that in there.
Yeah, I mean, it probably took me a good 10, 12 hours worth of research, and there was a limit to how long I could spend on it, because it is just an extracurricular, bit of fun. But I did get really in the weeds, so it was probably between 12 and 16 hours worth of work to do it all. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Really good.
Yeah. Were there other? That was actually one of the questions from the chat as well.
I hadn't seen that. Thanks, Gundam.
Were there any other questions from the audience? Feel free to go off mute, and it's a really nice segue into our second half of today's session, which is all about an open Q&A on data visualization. We're having an ask us anything session. Any burning questions, let us know. This is where we've got our special guest, Ben Ferry. So he's our resident expert in visualizations, but also seeing Michael Barry's presentation. That's awesome. I think we've got one participant hand raised. Bud, would you like to go off mute and just feel free to ask your question?
Hello, Michael. Thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to ask, you were talking about a link of, I think I missed that slide, and then you said you can go through later on. So if you have a link for that slide, I hope the second point I'm talking about, WRCP something, where there were some bars on the left-hand side. So I was quite interested to go through to that report. So would you have the link of that slide by any chance, or is there any way that we could access to that?
Yeah. So which one was it that you wanted?
It was WRCP or something before you started your presentation on this topic. So you did recommend a visualization display that you said you can later on go through that slide. So on the left hand side, I just jumped in at the time, so I'm sorry.
No, so I'll share all the links that are available in the in the thing, and I'll see if I can publish a public version of the Power BI report so you can click through it. I'll put that in the chat.
All right, thanks, Michael. Thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Michael, is it okay if we in the blog write-up afterwards put those links in there, and maybe a link to your Power BI report as well?
Yeah, sure. No worries at all.
Awesome. Cool. That's fantastic. Were there any other? Oh, we're getting heaps of comments in the chat saying thank you.
Okay, we've got a question here from Darren. So Michael, how would you use that data to predict D-Day for when we hit the threshold? So sort of working backwards, I guess, the projection.
Yeah, so forecasting is something that you can definitely do in DAX. So the language that Power BI uses. So I mean, it really depends on how you want to do that. I mean, there's so many different ways, and unfortunately, I'm not a mathematician. So I mean, if you were just using a weighted average, you could definitely do that in DAX. Or if you wanted to use Python or something like that, there are methods to use R and Python on your data set to kind of predict it into the future.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we've looked at doing just a simple linear regression in DAX, and it is surprisingly difficult. The DAX you have to write for it. So there are better tools out there to do that sort of predictive analysis. But within Power BI, you can, just like Michael said, do the R or Python visuals, which can run those more kind of complex algorithms behind the scenes. But yeah, hopefully we can reduce the trend. But yeah, no, the trend is definitely shifting upwards.
Yeah, it is a worry, and yeah, your visualization really spoke volumes to that, Michael. So thanks a lot. And
that's awesome. So I think we might transition now into the second half of the segment. So please, Michael's happy to stay on as a resident expert in visualization as well. So any questions about Power BI visualization or Power BI in general? This is your chance. Open forum.
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, Ben, without putting you on the spot, did you want to do an introduction of yourself, mate, just so people on the call know who you are?
Yeah, of course, no worries. So hello, everyone. I am Ben Ferry. I'm calling in from Berlin. A bit about myself, I suppose. I've been working with Power BI since like very late 2016. And I was like integrating this into the company I was working with at the time, which was BASF. And maybe important to actually let everyone know, I didn't actually call myself Power BI guy. I'm not like that full of myself. What happened was I was working at a company and I was like the loudest person pushing for Power BI. And I was giving the trainings and I was going to different places. And of course, people would ask questions and they would ask the wrong person and they would just go, okay, just ask Ben. He's the Power BI guy. Okay. So that's how that name appeared to me. And then
there's always a Power BI person.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. In my case, it was Guy, but there's always a Power BI person, sure, and so there should be. So I've been. I mean, Power BI for me changed the course of my career. To be honest, I did not study anything to do with data or math. I studied history and politics. Okay. I then worked as a flight attendant for 3.5 years. And then I got, actually my first ever office job was in Melbourne when I worked for Commonwealth Bank. And that's when, okay, let's build myself a career. Let's do something that I'm going to enjoy doing. And then I'd always kind of enjoyed data and numbers. And when I first opened Power Query, someone said, oh, you should check out Power BI. It's pretty cool. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And then I opened Power BI, and then here I am now, 2021, working for a different company and still pushing for Power BI.
That is awesome. And that's a story we've heard again and again and again from so many different people. It just shows that it's such a nice tool you can teach yourself.
Yes. It is a tool that, a lot of people change careers moving into. Yeah. I mean, even for Alice and myself, environmental engineering background, sort of jumping in 3 years ago, it is, exactly right. I couldn't have put it better myself, mate. So
I think it also speaks to the accessibility of the tool, to be quite honest, is that you can just open up a program that's there on Windows, pull in some data, and then just get started. I think for me that's one of the biggest strengths of Power BI. So anyone, I think someone just mentioned before that they're just getting started with the tool. I really enjoyed that. The just getting started part was so fun because there's just so much you can discover. And I opened like the first dashboard I ever created. Actually, it was like about a year ago. I looked at it and I was just kind of like, that's just not. That's bad. Well, but when I first created, I mean, it even had a pie chart. All right. We all started with a pie chart. Let's not lie to ourselves.
For people more in the environmental field on the call rather than data, in the data world, pie charts I recognise as not being good visualizations. So that's
true.
Yeah, but we had a question come in the chat from Jared. So it's a bit of a broader question. How do people find striking the balance between exploratory data viz versus final communication data viz when preparing the final product for clients? So for example, how often do you find clients want to know and interact with the explorative part rather than just the pretty end product?
Yeah. This is, I think it's a really cool question. I think for me, for this sort of thing, it's always, I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding the question, I'm just reading it now. Yeah, so when you're creating something, when you're creating visualizations and knowing your audience, knowing who's going to use that report, what that report is going to be used for, I'll be totally honest, when Michael started doing his presentation, I was like, cool, because I noticed a couple of things in that I would never use when I create reports, because I'm creating reports. But what Michael created for me was more like a report presentation. Yeah. So I love the fact that in your report, Michael, you were clicking on the arrow button to go to the next slide, essentially. Sorry, I'm a person who speaks like this. I apologize. But the next slide, you know, and this is a perfect example when you get a request from like a CEO or a C whatever who says, "Oh, can I have this in PowerPoint?" And you're like, "Hard no," because you can replace that with what Michael just did, which was essentially a fantastic presentation, which is interactive and is essentially a Power BI report. So I guess I'm quite long-winded. I understand that. It's just knowing the data that you want to present, how that data is going to be used, and what they're going to do after they see that data. You know,
Definitely.
Like there's nothing wrong with creating a report that just has like 4 visualizations, and that essentially is the report. But I always like to ask the question when first starting a project. Okay, tell me your job and how you do your job. And so when you've done this, when you've read this data, what do you then do next with that?
Yeah.
And that kind of like allows you to understand a more appropriate visualization or appropriate page to build for that person.
Yeah, definitely. And I
hope
think
that answered the question.
BI, it's really an explorative data processing engine. So sure, the executives might want to see it as a pretty end result, but it could really help drive their decision making in the analysis process, arrive at what you would actually display.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, if you go back to what Michael was showing, the very first visualization, you showed this beautiful thing with the lines moving and stuff. That's totally cool. That is essentially what you could potentially show a boss who just wants to see the result. But what the analysts want to see is they want to see everything that Michael did after that. It's like, how are you arriving at those results? So again, would they be appropriate to show a data analyst a thing where the bars are doing all this and it's all pretty and whatnot? Not particularly, because I'm not actually extracting anything other than an answer that's being created for me.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, would also be a part of the thinking.
Exactly right. And then, talking about the audience, Darren writing in the comment, he wants to see, what is the projection looking like for that threshold? So then that's another element you can build on. Mike, I was going to ask you, in your sort of experiences dealing with clients, how do you find that balance?
Yeah, exactly what Ben said. It's the typical answer when it depends.
Yeah.
It's just my personal preference is to usually properly curate a story so that it has a direct impact when the people see it. Because if my approach is, if someone wants to see all the working and the analysis and stuff, I'm trying to get them to be the Power BI developer. I don't want to be supporting the report. I want to be helping the people at the business pick it up. Like if they are an analyst, I want them to be doing the analysis and then teaching them how to show that final story. Yeah. I find that any time that a user is having to click on something, then you've missed the mark in terms of the actual story that you're trying to create. I mean, people want to be able to click, and that's fine, but from a just pure data viz point of view, you want to have this is what you need to take away from it, and now you have an action and you can go and you can do that.
Yeah, like making your landing page the exact summary almost, and if people want the detail, they can click in and filter and slice. But no, that's a really good tip. We have another technical question. I I'd like to hear your comments on this. How to make matrix columns even. This is annoying. Does anyone have any tricks?
This comes in from Fernando. I think Fernando, forget where you're from, mate, but one of our regular, maybe Brazil, one of our regular meetups. But sorry, please, Ben, go ahead.
I do have an actual video on YouTube for this. I'm pretty sure I do. Yeah.
Awesome.
You need to it's one of those workarounds that you wish you didn't have to use, but you kind of do. And it involves using like a simple DAX. So like if you just create a measure, which call it spacer or something, and then you use the DAX REPT.
Yeah.
And so you're basically saying, so reps, and then give a value 0, and then repeat it a certain number of times. Then you put that in. This is going to sound ridiculous. It's easier to put. I'll link the video, whatever. And then you put that into your matrix, and then you put on the auto column width on, and then you switch off auto column width, and then you take out the measure. Then they'll all be aligned perfectly.
Oh my god, that's incredible!
Yeah, it works really well.
That is amazing.
And you said you've got a video on your YouTube channel of that already? Yeah, otherwise, this recording bit right here. Yeah. Very good.
Wow, my workaround, which is super bad and clunky now, after hearing your very sophisticated one, was you just load the measure and then you manually go and auto fit everything, and then it works.
Yeah. It's such a pain. It's one of those things. It's like when you see all the updates that are fantastic made by the Power BI team, and always very impressed by them. And it's just one of these things. But how is this not still it? What are you gonna do? But yes, there's a workaround, and it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes, like I think if you're using multiple measures, it kind of fails. But most of the time, it works pretty well. So I can link the video if you want.
Did you know that, Michael? Is that new to you?
No, I have read it. Like when the question came up, I was like, oh yeah, I would just Google that. I know there's some things out there to do it, but my hack for that is to try to convince the client to not use the matrix.
Oh really?
Right.
I love the matrix visual.
I love the matrix.
I just hate tables in general. I try to just try to get them removed.
You know, I like what I love to do. Sorry, I didn't mean, please.
I'll go for it, Ben.
What I love to do, I used to really hate matrices and tables, but then what I realized you could do with matrix is that you can present the data, but make them not look anything like a matrix or a table. And I think when you do that, they actually look quite cool. I mean, in general, I'll always say, okay, like especially when someone comes to me and says, oh, Ben, I've got this Power BI, I've got this report in Excel. Can you recreate that in Power BI? That's always like, so many red flags, you know what I'm saying? So I tend to steer away from them. But I think it's always important that, for me, the matrix is probably the best visualization in Power BI, in the fact that it's the most versatile. You can do so much with it. You can show so much data. Either you can create the heat chart with conditional format and the heat charts and stuff, which are exceptionally. I mean, I created a report from using weather data from an open API. And of course, weather data. Well, of course, we've just been discussing weather. So for the conditional form for that. So yeah, I get it, because people say, I don't want to use them. But in general, they're going to look pretty cool.
You can get creative.
Yeah, getting creative is exactly correct. Yeah.
But, another question. Sorry, go for it.
Sorry, Michael, you go.
Yeah, so I was going to say that your demo environmental report has a lot of creative use of matrices, like and same with your AFL one, I think, with the flags and stuff, like rendering the images and things.
Yeah.
Like an AFL report, that's really cool.
Yeah, like for environmental scorecards and stuff, where you bring icons and then the different conditional formatting, like the client, it is a nice way of communicating that information. And as Alice said, it is very familiar to the engineers and scientists. And
everyone loves a good table. Yeah. But thanks, Michael.
That's a good point.
We did have a question from Richard Hamilton. So he's new to this space. What drivers should send me to Power BI? I'm using Power Query now. Oh, who wants to tackle this one first?
That's a big question. I mean, I would start by saying that, Power BI isn't a one-to-one replacement for Excel. You know, like if you're using stuff, I mean, first of all, awesome that you're using Power Query, because it discounts a certain number of people who are doing Excel reporting who are still not touching Power Query. And for me, you're kind of done if you're creating, you know, using Power Query well, you're kind of doing half the job. Because what a lot of people don't realize or forget is that any Power Query you create can just be copy pasted directly into Power BI, and you've already got your data transformation done. You know, I mean, drivers for me should be the fact that you know, Excel crashes all the time. You know, but I think for me, when you just by putting data in Power BI can make you understand and see things in data that you wouldn't have seen very, very quickly. I mean, because you have the visualization element, because it's a visualization tool, because you have that there, it's just, for me, everyone's brain works differently, and I'm a very visual person. I think it's just easier to understand your data and certain aspects of your data. Even because you're thinking about something new, you're going to start clicking on things and exploring it in a way you previously wouldn't have. Sorry, Michael, you want to speak?
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, no, all really good points. The two I would add is space, so you can save on size, because Power BI has the Vertipack engine. So for anyone that doesn't want to be dealing with 500 meg Excel files, the compression in Power BI is much better. And the really big shift is dimensional modeling. Dimensional modeling is should be an essential part of any data person's toolkit. And so you need to, if you get that skill, it'll really help you with designing and understanding data in the future. And it's virtually impossible in in Excel, unless you're using Power Pivot, but then you should already be using Power BI.
And I guess with Excel,
very good points. Yeah.
We work with a lot of organizations who are, Excel is the database for all engineers and scientists. They love it. I love it.
Database.
Yeah. I don't know. But I think like the big shift really is you end up in organizations with like Barry's master spreadsheet version 5, and you have all of these different versions of the truth. You can easily duplicate your Excel files. It's not so easy to share and make them discoverable to other people in your organization. A big advantage of Power BI is you can create that single source of truth, that centralized database, dimensional data model of your data. You can publish it to the online service and then share that with all the other groups in your organization and make that data really discoverable. But then you can also have the additional layers of rigor and QA on top of it by making these data sets, your Power BI models, you can make them certified, you can make them endorsed. And I think that's a big step. It's that transition from going from, okay, I'm an Excel user, I can do all these cool things by myself for my own group, to saying, okay, this data is really valuable and important for my entire organization. How can I, with a small step, if you're already using Power Query, you're pretty much there. You can put it in Power BI and just make it more of a organizational platform and tool.
Yeah. Because chances are the person in this next department might be doing the exact similar sort of thing with their Excel spreadsheet. So this just makes it, I guess, more streamlined across a larger business as well. So that's well put.
We've got a question from Eamon.
Hey, Eamon.
So can someone talk about the applications of connecting Power BI and Power Apps? I've seen Power Apps being used to write data from Power BI to a database, and I'm wondering if you can use Power Apps to do the opposite. So record user input and use them within Power BI report. So thanks, Praveen. She's already answered saying yes, you can embed a Power App in a Power BI report. There are some easy examples on YouTube. And thanks, Kat, for doing the right back example. Michael, you taught Praveen that.
So maybe Michael, you want to expand on
do you want to give an example of how you've used Power Apps and Power BI together, Michael?
Me?
Yeah, I think, have you got some examples on YouTube? Is that?
No, not me.
Michael, I was actually at one of your presentations when you told me that it can be done.
Oh, right. Okay.
But 6 months later, I found an example on YouTube where you could create an app and then just kind of embed that onto the Power BI report.
Yep.
And then get the Power BI report to link back to the app and pick up that data. There's some simple examples for things like people entering a date and then the amount of hours they've done for the day. And then that just creates a table on the back end. But you sent me on that path. You may have forgotten.
There you go. Yeah, well, I mean, I've definitely talked about the Power Apps visual before. So a common use case we have for that is around entering comments. So like we have a SharePoint list sitting in the background, and the Power App just connects into the SharePoint list. And so they sit there in the meeting and they can write their comments explaining, why something's up or down. And then they just hit refresh on the little SharePoint listing and it'll pull through. So you can do the same thing from databases and stuff like that. The one caveat I have is sometimes it can be a little bit laggy between when they enter it and when Power BI decides to render it, because Power BI likes to cache things. But it's possible.
That's a really cool use case for it. Have you played around with Power Apps, Ben?
I have. I just started doing it early this month, actually. The one thing that I've started to enjoy doing it for is, for example, when we have the company that I work for, we have obviously linked to the cube and I do cube import. When I refresh the data at a scheduled time, if the cube isn't finished, it's sometimes very tight because they want the data by a certain time. Then, of course, there's no data in the report. So I started building buttons in the report. So when if the data is not there, they click the button, which is a Power App, which then starts the refresh process, which I know can be done in the workspace, but I do not let any of my users anywhere near a workspace because my God. I think someone mentioned this before actually about how you using reports in apps to ensure that it's I always just share the embed link, to be quite honest, because the embed link, it opens like a nice website, you know anything and you're not distracted. So that way, and also what's cool about the refresh button thing is that because with Power Apps you can define who has access to the button. It's not like you're going to get 150 users crazily hitting the refresh button and exploding your data warehouse. It's going to be like 2 managers maybe have access to do this. Yeah. So it's pretty good fun. And I mean, I've heard that there's going to be an update to buttons in Power BI that are linked to a more intense Power Automate process where it can also read slicer values and all this type of stuff.
Oh, awesome.
I think that's on the roadmap. It's coming. When was it?
The Power Automate visual.
Yeah, that's going to be fully rad. Yeah. I'm so looking forward to that. It's going to be awesome. So I actually stopped the rollout of what I was doing based on this March update. So hopefully with that we'll be able to do a little bit more. But that's what I've done with it.
Oh, that is exciting. That's a really exciting update because it means that the data we're presenting in Power BI reports is suddenly actionable. You can click a button, something will happen. So
exactly.
So I guess going back, Eamon, thanks for the question, and thanks Praveen, Pat, and Douglas for putting forward the articles and suggestions, and obviously Michael and Ben.
That's really awesome. Good. Were there any quick last questions? So it could be a broad question or a technical question. Your last chance.
There's some pretty good data visualization people in the call still, but I wouldn't want to name anyone to come up here and ask their question.
Don't want to put them on the spot.
I've just been looking.
Michael or Ben, if you wanted to ask any questions, just of the general audience.
I just want to say that I've been looking at this. Sorry, Michael, you mentioned before this, the Monday thing. I forgot the name of it already. I've got the worst memory in the world. What's it called again? Sorry.
Makeover Monday.
Makeover Monday. I was looking at that as you mentioned it, and I immediately love it. So I'm fully going to be enjoying that. It's got some cool ideas, some cool visualizations, and it's nice that you mentioned this access to data that can be used as well, because sometimes accessing like good data sets is like can be quite annoying. So this is really cool. So I, for one, will be joining this movement because it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some really good ones, and there's some really bad ones as well. So you can, if you're starting out, it doesn't matter. Like everyone's quite friendly on the hashtag. Like no one, that's kind of part of the premise is everyone's kind of being a visualization community. So it is. I'd encourage everyone, no matter what your stripes, to get involved and.
I think it's a good point in general. Actually, what I've always, to be honest, like I've only really recently started doing stuff with Power BI, like presenting, doing videos and stuff, and I was quite nervous about it. But everyone is very supportive. I thought, oh my god, what if like the video is not good enough, or what if I say something stupid? And I think anyone who's really just wants to get involved, just go and do it, because everyone seems to be like me. They might say it to themselves, but they don't say it out loud. This is fine.
It's a really safe space. So anyone, if you're wanting to test your presentation skills, show a new technique, please, we're always looking for volunteers.
Nice tie-in.
Yeah.
Well, in the interest, we've got one more question in the chat, which we might ask, and then we might just wrap it up in the last few minutes. So Brendan has asked, how do most clients test their reports? He's seen published reports where reports either have visual level or page level filters, but often either forget filters or apply the wrong ones and don't pick it up until a user realizes some values don't make sense in production. So I guess, how do you sort of you match that in your reports and setting it up and getting that feedback from people?
I mean, when it comes to the amount of reports that I send out where there's a filter that shouldn't be applied, or just do it. I mean, it's as long as the person knows that the report that you send out is not the finished final article. I mean, basically you have a stakeholder, you have the person who requests the report. So the first person who sees the report is that person and no one else, So it's not like you're going to release it to 150 people straight away, or even 10. It should be, for me, a maximum of 3 stakeholders, because any more than 3 people, you're going to start getting just too much feedback, and it's going to be, oh, but I want this, I want it. The worst project I have ever worked on, I just got a flashback. It was so bad. They had a focus group of, it was the entire department was the focus group, and it was everyone. We brought in a service, because I was working in a service center back then. We brought in a service from a different company, and the process wasn't aligned. So instead of aligning the process, they tried to build a Power BI dashboard, a report, I should say, to basically bring all those processes together. And they wanted every single measure, every single filter, and I worked on this for about 6 months. And in the end, I was just like, no more. You define what you want and you come back to us. So that is basically, make sure you send it out to, you define, first of all, your group who are telling you what they want, and they see the report. And when they're happy with what they want and what you've provided, then that's enough. Of course, when it starts to get rolled out more, you might get more feedback, but basically always ensure that the initial group is a small group and not like, and that's fine if there's going to be errors, if there's wrong filters or false calculations. It's part of the job, right? Exactly. I hope anyway.
So what I would say is you need to have a defined UAT process, and then it's not your fault. Basically, if you've got, and also now with the deployment pipelines in Power BI, there's very few excuses for not having a proper UAT process. You can publish to dev, and then you can roll that to UAT, and it actually gives you a code compare with the things that you are changing between the 2 workspaces. And then once your stakeholders have signed off on UAT, then it's not your fault. You shouldn't be responsible for testing. I mean, for instance, if I was publishing my climate data, I would have to get the climate scientists to say, yes, that's right. Because I don't know. I'm a report developer. So having that dev test production pipeline is really important. The one thing I have noticed though is if you're using calculation groups, you can't use the deployment pipelines because they error out, which is very annoying. But
we must be looking into that.
I hope so.
Very good point,
no,
Michael.
That's very
Ben.
good. And so UAT, for those in the environmental industry, that's user acceptance testing. And it's just like a QA checklist. Just get the people, your business users who you're creating the report for, to sign off on both the calculations, the visualization, the terminology. But when you're creating reports with different visualization features, like using the filter pane and buttons and bookmarks, just be wary of if the data does change, then it can change certain behaviors as well. Mm-hmm. So it's an iterative process, but definitely get some sort of rigorous QA or UAT process. Mm. And just make it a collective decision. So once they sign off, then collectively as a team, you've said, yep, this is okay. And then just have a process in place so that if some things do sneak through the cracks, you can quickly correct it.
And don't allow every user to come back to you. Don't allow every user of the report to contact you. Make it sure that, again, there's a maximum of 3 people, because again, you're going to get emails from so many people. Just a small point, but
ring fence the requirements and the UAT number of people.
Yeah.
I'll just put this up again, and just to wrap up the session. So, yep, it was not really too much more, except as per usual, we've been recording this session. We'll put it up in the final blog, and we'll try and get it out later this week.
Yeah.
I think the January session took us a while, so sorry about that. And as you would have seen on this call and hopefully our other sessions, we're a really sort of friendly group of people, and all our members are, it's like a warm, safe space. So we're always encouraging people, if you've got an idea for a session or a presentation, then please get in touch with either Alice or myself. And yeah, it'd be great to have all these sort of different people's experiences. So
and I think so for our next session, we do this monthly, it's going to be in March. We're going to be presenting on a bit of an energy theme. So if anyone works in the energy sector and has any really cool visualizations or different projects they've been working on which they'd like to share, then please reach out to us. We've got a couple of slots available for next month. That would be awesome.
And that was it. Special thanks to Michael for your presentation and also your insights, mate, afterwards. That was really really good. And Ben, mate, 2 a.m., now 3 a.m., I think. I really appreciate
that is commitment.
Really appreciate your staying on the line, and
my pleasure,
great to hear your thoughts, and especially the story of where you've sort of come from as well. So thanks very much.
It was really good fun. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for dialing in. I love it how when people ask a question in the chat, everyone on the call has already answered it. That is great.
Really good. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
care. Bye-bye.